Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Kevin Volk. I'm one of the principals and one of the owners here at Holst Architecture. We're going to do a quick round of intros for the four of us before jumping into the two projects. So, Sarah?
Thanks. My name is Sarah Voss. I am a senior associate at Holst Architecture and a project designer, and I'll be talking to you about Fora today.
My name is Dustin Fursett, senior associate at Holst. I've been here 11 years. I was the project designer on PRAx, and I'll be presenting that with Kim.
Thanks. I'm Kim Wilson. I'm a principal and owner at Holst. Just talk a little bit about Holst very briefly. We're an office of about 56 or 55 people now. We have our main offices in inner Southeast Portland. We've been there for a very long time. And we also have an office, a small satellite office in Minneapolis, which is actually where I'm based. Most of I would say our passion, the work that we do that we find the most joy in is, community-based work. So it's, civic-minded projects, it's social service projects that you're going to hear about today. And then we also do extensive housing, both affordable housing, market rate housing, and mixed use housing of all types. We work, in the Pacific Northwest, but we also do projects kind of all across the country, Mountain West, and some work on the East Coast, and then of course some work in the Midwest. I think with that, we're gonna start with Sarah and Kevin on the Fora project.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim. I think Sarah's looking at me like I'm supposed to start. Is that right, Sarah? Thank you. Yeah, we're going to go through the Fora Health project. I was, I guess, the project designer. Sarah was a project architect on the team, along with a wealth of others. So we don't want to take sole credit for the project, but we had a lot of other folks involved from the office on the project, and it's a project we're very proud of. So we're excited to share some of our lessons learned today and how we got to where we went. So our learning objectives, were the trauma-informed techniques as well as some of our lessons learned. So sorry, Sarah. One of the things I think we wanted to hit on just right away is to put everybody sort of on the same framework, and where we started off on this project is understanding sort of the predicament that Oregon's in the nation. Oregon is notorious for being first in the nation for meth and opioid use, and one of the last in the nation for providing resources for those addictions. So it's last in access to care, or typically close to last, if not always last. So it's a real problem we have here. We have a large percentage of folks with alcohol use disorders, and the reality is when we get into the building industry, especially in construction, that almost doubles. So a number that is already high and fifth in the nation gets a lot higher when we talk about specific groups. So Fora came to us with a mission that included, essentially recreating their identity as an organization. They had done tremendous work for quite a number of years, but they were stuck in a 4-story building downtown that really didn't suit their needs, didn't have an elevator, really limited the kind of care that they could provide. And so they really had this vision of creating a healthcare environment for substance use disorder, and to treat folks who have that with respect and dignity, and provide them with the best potential or chance of a positive outcome in that situation. So they came to us, and they had Swen Ho, who some of you might know with Resolve Architecture and Planning, and who was also with U of O for a long time, on their board at the time. And she worked with them to create, really a number of goals, and even some sketches to sort of, represent what that could be and the feeling that they were looking for. And so we started this process with them, looking at that and understanding their program of 70, they were looking for 70 adult treatment beds, 24 medical withdrawal management beds, also known as detox, and then a outpatient clinic to serve 450 people. And that, I think, doubled what they could do in their downtown location at the time. So some of their demographics, which we think is important, 95 or 94% of their patients are on Medicaid. So that's where most of their funding is coming from. Average age is in the late 30s. Most of the people coming in, over 50%, have multiple substance use or multiple substance use disorders, but also other co-occurring mental health diagnosis. Over 80% or 85% have that. And 35% are homeless at admission. So one of Fora's big missions has become and has gotten stronger and is actually sort of projecting where they're going, is creating housing for those coming out, because they will not send people back onto the street because it has a huge impact on their ability to stay within the program. So.
Sweet. Thanks, Kevin. I think, having that demographic information really helps us understand why trauma-informed design is so important in the substance use treatment space. A lot of people are coming into the space from a place of pain. So I'm going to give us a quick primer on how we think about trauma-informed design and some of the strategies that we have tried to implement. And then we'll look at how those were applied to this building. And then, we're always learning new things in this field. And it seems like every new conversation with providers and peer groups seems to give us some new insight. So that's all to say, we're not experts in trauma-informed design. We're learning alongside everybody else. But this is what we know right now. So I found this working definition of trauma to be useful. So really understanding it as a physiological stress response in the body. The left-hand graph shows a healthy stress response where your heart rate spikes and then drops quickly once the body assesses that there's no threat. The right-hand graph shows a trauma stress response where once your heart rate spikes, it stays elevated. And that can be really challenging to come back to a neutral state from. So our goals for trauma-informed design are twofold. We have, on the one hand, reducing stressors in the environment to avoid triggering that stress response in the first place. And then on the other hand, we are also trying to foster well-being in folks so that we can bring people back to themselves in their healing journey. And our strategies, we put our strategies kind of into these 6 buckets. So on the reducing stressors side, we have comfort, safety, and de-escalation. And I'll talk about those a little bit more. And then on the well-being side, we have comprehensibility, meaningfulness, and manageability. And we've shared a lot of really specific information strategies about these strategies on our website. So I'll just touch on how these relate to the addiction treatment space, and then we can get into how they work in this building. So reducing stressors, so comfort, we found acoustics and lighting in particular to be of concern in these spaces because of the construction type. We end up with a lot of firewalls or fire partitions, and doors and fire partitions have to have closers. Those closers tend to slam. That becomes a big problem in these spaces for sound. Any hard surfaces in spaces like dining halls or bigger areas where a lot of people are gathering tend to bounce around sound and feel very chaotic and remind people maybe of being institutionalized. So we're incorporating acoustic treatment wherever possible. And then with lighting, people in recovery or going through withdrawal often have heightened light sensitivity. So dimmers and indirect lighting become really important. Safety is about psychological safety as well as physical safety. So individuals coming in for treatment might be coming from a place where they've had to be hyper vigilant. Maybe they've been homeless, constantly on guard to keep from being victims of theft or assault, or maybe they're coming from an abusive household. So keeping visibility front of mind and making sure that there are multiple ways to exit a situation are really important to making folks feel safe in the spaces. And then de-escalation, we're providing quiet spaces where individuals can decompress from an elevated stress state. At the same time, we're trying to avoid cluttered spaces or tight spaces where people might be in close quarters with each other and with things, so spaces naturally get a little bit bigger than code minimums. And then for the fostering well-being side, we have comprehensibility. So we can also call this one coherence. It is about perceiving one's surroundings as ordered and structured and clear. In other words, we're designing a space that lends itself to creating a cognitive map. And that starts with a clear arrival sequence using landmarks throughout the space for intuitive wayfinding. And that's especially important for folks coming in for treatment where they might be under the influence or otherwise not in a completely present state of mind. The next one is meaningfulness. It's about the feeling of life having an emotional meaning and creating positive connections with the world around us. So, you know, if addiction is the narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure, this one's about re-expanding that experience of the world through community, art, recreation, spirituality, providing space for all of that. And then also trying to engage people in dynamic, aesthetic, multi-sensory experiences. And having space for access to nature becomes a really crucial vehicle for that. And then manageability, we can also call this empowerment. This is about providing those lighting controls, those temperature controls, those seating options, areas for personalization, centralized services for staff, but most of all, it's about developing an individual's sense of agency in their situation and in their environment so they can heal themselves. So with that, we're going to talk to you about Fora Health and how we tried to integrate some of those trauma-informed strategies into the design. We're also going to talk to you about what we've learned since. So when we designed this building, Kevin touched on it a little bit, Fora was coming from a space that wasn't purpose-built and they'd have to adapt to their needs. And it was a big deal that the new building even had an elevator. They were used to operating with one without one. But now they've been in the building for almost 5 years and we've continued to work with them on newer buildings. We have been analyzing what's working, what's not working with them, what their new workflows look like, what their new policies look like, and we're optimizing our design approach through what amounts to an extended post-occupancy study. So I'm going to talk us through the design points and then Kevin will jump in with some of the things that we've learned. So to give us a quick context and zoom out, we had this oddly shaped site behind Mall 205, north of the Adventist Health Campus in East Portland. We had a nice stand of old growth trees at the north end of the site, so we knew the building would be pushed to the south. We also knew we would need to incorporate green space. So we started with an enclosed courtyard, which evolved to open up and really embrace the whole site. Opening up the building to the outdoors became a really key way that we created that physical and visual connection to nature. And then, and that one relates to the trauma-informed design strategy of meaningfulness. The building itself is made of stained Western red cedar, and the roof form, we have these kind of asymmetrical gables that's inspired by the Cascade Range, and that was in a further attempt to connect back materially and conceptually to the natural beauty that surrounds us in this part of the country. Again, with the meaningfulness strategy. And another point on the exterior, we've got this really strong entry that helps people coming into the building for the first time to know exactly where they need to go.
Some of the lessons we learned through our investigations and our understanding of the next projects that we're working on with some of them positive and some of them less positive. But in this case, a lot of our lessons learned were pretty pretty positive takeaways. So the courtyard actually became even more integral to their operations than I think we ever imagined. We knew that the outdoor space would be hugely important, and obviously that's why we sort of organized the building around the courtyard and enveloped the site with the fencing. And but it's become a huge part of their program and their treatment. I think more than they could have envisioned before, with their location downtown. The warmth of the wood on the exterior really helps foster that's welcoming, sense of welcoming into the site and into the building. It's something that we've actually, again, been working with them on multiple other buildings and bringing across, rather than form, we're bringing materiality across projects, which has proven quite helpful. And the obviousness of the entry. It's easy to think, as we do, I think, as designers and architects, of how important that is. And Sarah and I were talking this morning about how, like, for us, it's very obvious. You approach the building and this is the entry because we worked on it for so long. But we think that it is, there's a clarity to the composition. There's a clarity to the material change. And so that's something that is, when we start looking at creating a campus of buildings, which is what's happening on this campus and other locations, it's so hugely important to create that sense of entry and identity to those spaces, to make it very, very clear to folks who are not always in the, have the clarity of mind to give it as much thought as we might want, that we're providing that obviousness to the building.
Absolutely. So a little more about the building. The building is 2 stories. Level 1 has an admin wing on the west side with a separate entry. That was intentional. And then the main lobby, in that image that we were just looking at, is here, is where everybody else is supposed to enter. So the intent there was to simplify staffing by having a single front desk, and to make wayfinding really, really clear by having staff greet you and point you in the direction you need to go immediately upon entry. So you can see admin is in this orange color, or withdrawal management, or detox, sometimes called, is in this yellow. Outpatient is purple, and then residential is blue. And residential is primarily upstairs, but downstairs they have their dining space. And then the second story, you can see, again, primarily residential, with that admin wing on the west. The residential program orients itself around the courtyard, but also that main lobby atrium, trying to make that a landmark in the building, landmark space. So here's the idea in a section diagram. Admin is on its own, and then the rest of the program tied together by the central lobby that helps with wayfinding and simplifies staffing. So that's that manageability for staff and comprehensibility for visitors. And then upon entry, here is our double height lobby that becomes really, it's become a hub for the building, and it does function as that wayfinding landmark within the space, has lots of seating options for people, for comfort and for empowerment as well. But we did learn some things.
We did, and although I think the lobby and the diagram of the building really achieved the goals that they came into the project with, once they started operating, I think it became clear that they might want to rethink their goals. So it brings a lot of folks together into one space. Unfortunately, what it can do at times, though, is create a lot of confusion. There's a lot of folks in the space with different programs, and so there's some safety concerns at times. COVID didn't help. They created a separate entry during COVID for withdrawal management, so that folks coming into that program weren't coming through the main lobby. And that was really, I think, an eye-opener for them of, our running the program with separation is more important than having more than one, not having more than one desk. So newer projects, we're looking at separate entries. The space still works great for them. They still utilize it for graduations and a lot of program, but there's been some some overlap concerns with outpatient programs and residential programs in the same space. So it's definitely something we're learning. And then with that mix of program, there also becomes more noise concerns. So the more people in that space, the harder it is to keep the noise levels down. So those are things we're working on with them.
Absolutely. Another space we wanted to show you is the withdrawal management space. So on the left here, you can see the waiting area with a view into medical group office. And then on the right side is the group sleeping area. That is how they had arranged their sleeping spaces in their existing building and how they wanted them arranged in this new building, with views from a nurse station into that space as well. So all the views are set up with the intent to create more visual connection and thereby that sense of safety. But again, we learned a few things.
The importance of privacy and lighting controls are crucial in these areas. This is an area that actually their medical director changed during the course of construction. And so the operational layout for the space actually changed during construction as well. So getting that dialed in with different folks and how the different operators want to function was crucial.
Right. So another space to highlight is the residential wings. So in this building, we designed it around 2 residential wings, one for male identified patients and one for female identified patients. And these images show an open resident hub and one for, on the left, the resident assistance hub. And then on the right, a open lounge. Again, we're thinking about that sense of safety as it relates to keeping the sight lines open. I think in this one, we learned a couple of things about gender separation.
Yeah, it's the flexibility required for the staffing, not the staffing, excuse me, but the census, it changes. So we have a pretty strict, almost 50-50 male-female ratio of wings. And so that's something on future projects we're working with them to create flexibility within that structure, also providing less of a breakdown. So we're having more mixed gender spaces. They have spaces, they have the ability for folks to attend other locations that have more separation if needed, but they can also have locations that have more combination of gender neutral spaces.
And a big thing with that too was the restrooms. So in this building, we designed the restrooms as group restrooms with, I think, one or maybe 2 individual restrooms in each wing in the new space we're designing for them, which has programmatically quite similar. All of the restrooms will be individual restrooms in lieu of group restrooms. And that's just to accommodate anyone who might not identify with male or female. They can have their own private space. And just helps them to serve more people more flexibly. And then the last space we wanted to show you, and then we'll summarize all of this, some of the amenity spaces. So these 2 images show our shared amenity spaces for residential treatment. On the left is a group room. On the right is the art room. We also have a fitness room, a small library, a number of smaller meeting rooms, many more group rooms. I think they use one for yoga and one for movies. But part of the program is really incorporating those spaces where people can just recreate, spend their time, learn things. Those spaces for meaningfulness was important to the program. So we sized these pretty generously with large windows for daylighting. And I think one of our lessons learned was
storage. Can't have enough storage. There's so many things happening and programs they want to be able to provide, and all of that stuff needs to go in more places. But of course, that was one of their things cut early on in programming to save some costs, but they're learning those lessons.
Mhm. Right, and when you provide big spaces, they might
They
get
get
filled
filled
up
up.
with things. Exactly right. Kevin,
This is me. Okay, summary of
close
our
us out.
lessons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think we just went through obviously all of those, but for us, this is a ever evolving sort of process with these clients and with the community at large. It's not a it seems that a lot of providers have a difference of opinion on how things should function and operate. And so we're really using all of the projects that we're working on in this space to sort of take our steps from one to another. What have we learned? We're sharing across projects, we're sharing with different clients about how we can perfect spaces for folks, and knowing that it's going to change and people's needs change, and the substances people go through or coming off of change. How do we create a space that, regardless of all that, is still a respectful, peaceful, and meaningful space? And that's our goal now with all of these projects. And some of our outcomes that we've been able to learn from Fora, it really has allowed our treatment completion rates to exceed the national averages, which is a wonderful thing. 100% of their patients go out of this building with some place to live. And that is, I think, one of the things we're most proud of. And that's not because of the space, but it gives them the ability to go reach out to other providers and make connections to the community to provide that. Higher acuity patients get treated, something they couldn't really do before at their downtown locations. And then adjacency to the Adventist hospital allows primary care relationships to be strengthened between their clients and their providers. So.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. I think that's what we have for you on Fora. So Dustin and Kim are gonna take on PRAx.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's get the screen shared. All right, nod that you can see this, Sarah. Perfect. All right, well, we're going to talk about PRAx. Obviously, this is one of the projects across the state that Patricia Reeser has donated to. She has a large investment in the arts all across the state. We started this project in 2018 and spent 6 years until it was opened last year, spring of 2024. Very exciting project for us to work on, mainly because it was trying to push the boundaries of a lot of things, challenging us to think outside of the box, challenging us to kind of take an area of the campus that doesn't have a lot of campus buildings at the time, and take that kind of a brownfield site and turn it into a center for arts. So we started with amending kind of the OSU master plan and created an arts district, the idea of paths and things leading to this building. But obviously we didn't start and know where we were going to go. It was sort of a process to get there. And I'm going to lead us through kind of our Holst design process on this project, and then Kim is going to talk us through kind of some of the prettier pictures of the build project that's there today. So learning objectives today, I think the main thing we're focusing on here is sort of kind of a mixing of how you use spaces. On this project, we called it collapsing distinctions. It was something we coined for the whole project, but it really, if you boil it down to, we didn't want there to be such a harsh difference between an audience and a performer or a student, and they all have their separate sides of the building. The idea is to kind of mix that all up. That also had to do with like the architectural expression, the flow through the building. And so we're going to look at some of those design elements today through a couple of lenses, sort of access, elevating the human experience, social interaction, kind of emotional and physical well-being. So just to quick orient everyone, in the off chance someone doesn't know where the OSU campus is, so we're in Corvallis. We're on the eastern side of the campus, kind of close to downtown, and this was a site that had sort of university services like sheds on it. So we was kind of a open slate site. Here's a picture of it provided by Hoffman Construction during demolition of the site. So you can kind of see in the top center of the image, the historic center of campus, and off to the left here is the baseball field. So we're on 15th Avenue. So a big part of our initial trying to figure out what we're doing with this building was a lot of discussions with OSU, and we decided we needed to kind of create a list of guiding principles to help us choose and pick and choose and evaluate design on all scales. So we obviously started with, creating a cultural arts district, and what that really meant here was, it's going to be a new hub for visual and performing arts. So we want it to become an iconic destination. It's going to be unique. It kind of have valuable culture and dynamic architecture. We wanted to collapse distinctions, which I kind of talked about. So this idea that there's not a front of house and back of house, or at least we blur the line between them. We're prioritizing education. So every space needs to be a teaching space. It's going to be an art incubator space. So, that influences the program, kind of our decisions about where we're putting student art versus professional art and how that's being displayed. A big one was democratizing space. So creating space that, breaks down traditional barriers and creates, the ability for everyone to use all the spaces. And then I think, multi-purpose is kind of obvious. We don't want single-use spaces. And then within the campus, we're trying to bolster the garden concept. So it's like celebrating the natural environment of the region and sort of agrarian culture with gardens throughout the site, and really, make this building part of the campus. And then, providing acoustic superiority in the venues, really, really uncompromising, especially in the recital hall. And then just looking at prioritizing sustainability, that's the total cost of ownership, sustainability, ease of management. So real quick, this is a diagram kind of a traditional performing arts building where you have front of house, patrons enter that way, you have your venues in the middle. So in this case, it's a theater, a black box theater, a recital hall, and an art gallery. And then that would be kind of wrapped by back of house and access for the performers on the other side. So one of the first ways that we try to sort of collapse distinction was to pull some of that lobby through the middle. So that, enhances the acoustic separation between the black box and the recital hall so they don't share the same walls. But it also starts to let, a patron who's there at a show be able to walk through areas that would traditionally be sort of off limits towards the back of the building. Then that morphs this is a diagram, like as we blend it into the site has some geometries, you'll see that in the architecture, but really solidifying this idea of like a crossroads of students and performers and staff and community members, and really using the lobby as this like piece we celebrate in the architecture, and it expresses itself on the exterior. And so that kind of led us to a form that we started to pull and carve in sort of a conceptual way. And then we started to marry that with a material palette that's kind of OSU, identifying wood. They have timber research on campus. Obviously, we're in the Pacific Northwest. And so we really wanted to use wood as a major expressive element on this building. So the images I'm going to show you here are just a couple snapshots around the building. When you see the vibrantly stained kind of natural cedar, that indicates an entry or some major point of interaction with the building. So the building has 4 entrances. It has sort of elements that are carved away where people can occupy sort of an upper terrace here on the left. Center image is the main entrance on the east of the building, and image on the right is the entrance on the north. and then sort of how that wraps around the building. There's an outdoor stage amphitheater space here on the right that's underneath that overhang. It's a projected volume out towards us that the angle is sort of cut at an acoustic angle to project sound without amplification onto the knoll that we're standing on. And then as we kind of look at the material palette, you know, we wanted to use brick. It's a big thing on campus, but we wanted to kind of be much more neutral so that the darker wood and rich wood of the entrances really pops. And I'll quickly talk about the plan, and then I'll let Kim walk us through the more illustrative photos of the interiors. But so in plan, we have 3 venues starting at the top. This is the theater. It's a black box theater. Basically, it's a completely variable space. So its idea is that it can kind of be transformed into any types of performance. In the middle, we have a recital hall. It's a 500-person hall. It has 2 levels, but they're connected internally. So we have 4 entrances to that. And then we have a art gallery on the south. So as I transition to Kim talking here, we're going to start in the lobby, and the lobby is broken into about 3 different spaces. They're associated with the venue, but they're also associated with different uses. There's a second level, but the second level is mostly about support and circulation into the recital hall, but it also has a lot of the student spaces in the spine that goes east-west that ends at the lobby on the east and on the west on a roof terrace.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. So here we are right at the north entrance, kind of looking south down that main, the main spine. That's kind of the collector of all the spaces. And some things, you know, you're going to hear a lot about flexibility, about multi-use, multi-function. And so in this space, it's one of the more refined kind of palettes that we have in the project, but you will see that we start to, as we kind of work our way down to the south end, we start to pull away some of that refinement of the wood and start to expose more of the structure of the building, kind of in similar vein of the collapsing distinctions that Dustin was talking about. We're always trying to do that kind of push and pull to kind of see how the building's really working and put together. And in this space, we've got the art boxes. These are kind of cabinet depth boxes that are used for art exhibits. They're internally lit, and so you can have a performance in here. You could have an art exhibit in here. Of course, it's a pre-function space to support both the black box theater, which is the Ray Theater just to our right, and then of course as you go down toward the art gallery and the performance hall, the reception desk also kind of pulls away and it banks back. It's on rollers and it kind of banks up against the wall, again in an effort to utilize the space for banquets or exhibits in some way. And then kind of key as we look down, we were very intentional about locating the main circulation. And you can see that elevator from each of our kind of 4 main entrances. And so what we did, we gave kind of primary or kind of equal importance to both kind of the grand stair, which wraps around that elevator, but also the elevator. So it's, fully, equal and accessibility is kind of at the forefront. We did design this elevator to be a pass-through, so there's no turning around once you get inside that elevator. And it puts you out on this kind of mezzanine second level that overlooks the student heart area. And so this is toward the south, excuse me, the south entrance, what we call the student heart. And this space is really all about flexibility. And so what we did is kind of a stage area that is partially permanent fixtures and then a lot of movable fixtures. So you could, there's just multiple possibilities. You can have a a lecturer standing on the ground and students or guests are sitting in the bleachers, you could completely remove all those, put all the, all the cubes out on the, dispersed on the floor, and have a performance on the stage. Of course, there's seating and gathering space up above that kind of rings this whole space. And then again, you'll see the exposed, the exposed structure, which we took some care with, and definitely have to shout out to Hoffman Construction and their subcontractors for all the work we did with coordinating all of these elements. Exposing structure is not simple, as everyone knows. And then as you see over top of the stage, this is the only permanent art piece in PRAx, and it's an artist, Rafik Inaldo, I think I say his name right. And this is actually a perfect combination of OSU's kind of their desire to combine art and technology and science. So this is actually based on digital data that was collected by OSU and put into basically a projection that is, this sculpture is ever changing in the space. It's quite it's pretty impressive to see. And then this is the recital hall, and so our 500 seat, a little bit more than 500. And again, in an effort to have equitable seating, we have interspersed both flexible seating, oversized seating, removable seating for ADA folks, and we tried to sprinkle that in kind of in all different seating areas here, just to really make this space equitable for all. You will see that the balcony does go all the way around the stage, and having that kind of intimate performance was really important to OSU. And the main entrances, you can see kind of over where that bright light is, where that exit sign is, those are the main entrances from the first level, and they are accessible to the stage from there. So I think we can flip ahead. Yeah, so this is the Ray Black Box Theater. And again, you can see the light boxes, which is just again a gesture to the east facade, kind of the dancing windows, kind of picking up that playful element that we did both in the lobby with the art boxes, and then in here with these light boxes. And the Black Box Theater is set up for multiple configurations for any type of performance or art exhibit. They do lectures in here, they can have classes in here. And then the entire space has a tension grid at about 17 feet above the floor. So it's completely customizable and provided for kind of maximum use, both for all technologies and rigging capabilities. There's also two large kind of storage rooms off the side to kind of house all of the structures that they have in there. And then the last kind of main public space is the gallery. It's about a 3,000 square foot gallery. And over on the left, you can see the main entry to the gallery, and to the far left is the south entrance of the building. And then what we tried to do is really bring that kind of angular wood from the entries that we have that we're carving into the dark wood. And we take that right into the gallery just to give it its kind of primary expression. The gallery again is designed to be interactive. It has natural light from both the kind of the east facade. We have a kind of a large show window. In this picture, it's covered by some banners. And then the roof monitor has a UV a light scrim on that. But it's, it was important to bring in natural light and the warmth of the wood into the space. And then moving just to the west, kind of out the main student entrance door is the RCB, which is the rehearsal classroom building. And so this was a rehab project. OSU has used this for different uses in the past. Most recently, it was a firing range. Before that, it was part of the heat plant distribution. And so we basically, added windows, tried to bring back some of the natural or the historic beauty of this building. So it was a pretty light touch architecturally. And then to give the arts school a space for performances. They do student performances here. It is not a first class acoustic space. So it's mainly for rehearsals and class. But it's actually just across this kind of student path off of the student corridor here. And so this is kind of the main east-west spine through the building here. And then what we did here is we made this space a little bit extra wide to house both student art and then spaces for students to hang out. And this is such an active space. It's always used. There's different types of seating arrangements that we have in there. And then just a few shots of some of the we call it back of house, but it's really, these spaces are really highlighted. So the makeup room and classroom, green room, and then some restrooms. The restrooms were all designed to be gender neutral. And then this is on the south side. I'll go through these really quick so we have some Q&A time. This is the Dixie Garden on the south end of the site, and with a hop structure inspired support for these enormous hammocks that are pretty well loved by the students there. And then I think we'll just end on a shot of some of the kind of finer grain details. We really tried to hold to kind of that idea of kind of weaving and carving into these spaces, and really excited by the high quality of craft and the way that this project turned out, both from a program and use standpoint, and also just from the beauty that was created here by our contractor.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It sounds like you've left this time for some questions. Is there anybody who has any questions? You can either speak up, or if you don't want to talk, you could put something in the chat. Or we can just sit here and be really impressed at your projects. Well, I guess if there aren't any questions, we've got Hanmei has said it's been great to see people are bringing in lots. Oh, we got some. Nancy, you've got your hand up.
Hi, it was delightful to see these projects. They're so beautifully expressive, and the spaces are just really inspiring. I was very interested in the first one about the challenge of navigating privacy versus like security or control, and how do you make these congregate spaces work for more than just a certain personality type. You started talking about that, but maybe if the team that worked on the first project could talk about the Fora one, that would be really great. I think it's a super challenge within many contexts to, respect the individual as well as have governance over it, control over it.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Nancy. I think that is something we think about on every one of these treatment centers. For that specific example with the kind of congregate sleeping arrangement within the withdrawal management space, the reason that they were doing that, was because they could have a nurse station that looked out over the whole span of the room. In the building we're designing for them currently, which is in partnership with Clackamas County, we're doing an arrangement that's a little bit different. It's still open beds, but the beds are arranged into 2-person pods, and there are walls between each pod, and the front is open, and the front faces the nurse station. And that way you're still getting the view from the nurse station to each pod. The pods of 2 allows them to serve couples, which I think is something that they can't do now because they have gender separated spaces. And I think that's quite interesting. And so that's for that specific use instance, but we're always talking about where does the relight go? Is there a relight? Is there a light in the door? Is there a window into the space? What does it look into? And then broader, like organizationally, what are the sight lines from the reception area, and how do we make that not too obvious and confrontational, but still open? We're thinking about it all the time. Do you have anything to add to that, Kevin?
I think that was great, Sarah. I think there's also the sort of the spectrum of care, and there's different levels needed for different levels of care. So we very much talk with the providers and our clients about the reality is those in withdrawal management need a lot more oversight than folks who are in outpatient. But outpatient also comes with its own difficulties because you're not controlling what comes into the building, and that can mix with folks who are very susceptible to something happening or something affecting their sobriety. So it is a challenging aspect, and it's also, I think, one of the why, as we talk more, there's more separation between some of those. So like community is so important to the outcome and community within the building, but also community outside the building. And one of the goals of the community space in this project was to be able to bring outside groups in. I think that was a very noble cause or noble idea. I think they've learned that's very hard in the way it's set up to do that. And so, on the project that we're working with them now in Clackamas, it's in a separate building. It's in a transitional housing building where there can be more flexibility about who comes in, and there's less concern about mixing folks in an outpatient program with folks in a residential program who are very much sort of on an edge. And so that's really all of the conversations we have is about what is the best way to provide the service to the folks who need it. And yeah, we can make beautiful spaces and we can make comfortable spaces and we can do that. But if we don't achieve the other things and make sure that this works the best way it can for those folks, then sort of we're not going to get there.
We have another question in the chat. Would you talk about your approach to acoustic mitigation in the lobby and theaters at OSU?
Sure. I can talk about it like an architect who knows a little bit about a lot of things, but not a lot of things about one specific thing. The acoustics between the lobby and the theaters are almost not comparable. So the lobby, we use a lot of like conventional acoustic panels in the ceiling. But when we go into especially the recital hall, so we hired Jaffe Holden out of New York City, probably one of the world's best acoustician firms. They do like computational models of the actual acoustics in the space. But I think there's 3 major things that happen in the recital hall. The first one is mass. So there's about a 24-inch thick concrete wall surrounding the entire thing that's acoustically isolated from the rest of the structure. So the recital hall sits like a building within the building. The second thing is geometry of hard surfaces. So you actually want to reflect sound, especially bass sounds, as much as you can in all directions. And thus why you saw like some of the detail photos of the wood walls with lots of faceted geometry that sort of scatter the sound in all directions, and you don't end up with a concentration of sound in one location, like a corner or the center of the room. And then the third is like soft materials So a lot of there's these reflectors on the ceiling that are scattering sound, that they tend to want to be rounded. Above them are hidden kind of, I'll say they're felt, but it's very large fabric panels that can be moved electronically, which you tune to the space. So the operators of the hall, if there's like an ensemble coming in, they have very specific requirements for how much reverberation the space has. So if you play a trombone versus a clarinet or hit a bass drum, what the differences between that are really important. And the human ear, maybe you don't know which is better, but you know when it doesn't sound right. And the differences between those things, they have to tune depending who's in there. And then there's acoustical banners that will come down and block those walls that are the kind of geometric wood walls. So like if you have a soloist, you know, obviously you want to reflect some more sound so that their voice carries. Whereas if you have a big, you know, large group of, you know, percussion, you're going to want a deadened sound so that you're not hurting people's ears or hearing too much echoes. Kim, you want to add anything? I feel like
That's
don't-
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say we also, you know, made, there was a lot of care taken to anything that, you know, penetrated that, the shell of that. You know, we didn't have there was no mechanical equipment on the roof of either the recital hall or the black box theater. So we had to make sure all of that was accounted for elsewhere. Obviously the openings, things like that, took a lot of attention.
So we're right at 6. We have one more question in the chat. Barbara, it says, Kevin and Sarah, it was wonderful that you followed up for several years to see what worked and what didn't. What methods did you use?
A great question, Sarah, or Barbara, sorry.
Barbara.
Yeah, we actually, I mean, the reality is we do post-occupancy evaluations on more and more of our projects these days. We've been doing it more on our affordable housing and some of our permanent supportive housing. This project, it happens to be that we stayed close with the client. They asked me to join the board after the completion of the project, and I was honored to. So, you know, I hear a lot through that, which is awesome, and we take that back. Try not to do it at every meeting, but I hear enough. And we're working with them on additional projects. And they've been very open with us about, you know, they're a changing organization. I think they know that. And so they know that they're changing how they work as well, and how they, you know, their model of service. And so they're also looking at how ways to improve as they do that. Now we're working with them on a transitional housing building on the same campus that'll be just south of the building. And so that started in January. We're in for permit now. We're going to start construction in January. So we've learned a lot from that, and things that worked for them, things that didn't, systems, materials, that types of thing. And now we're also doing a full new campus with Fora in Clackamas County. So Fora will be the provider. Clackamas County is providing the funding. And so we're developing a whole new campus with 2 similar buildings, slightly smaller in scale, but so we could really talk through like, okay, how is the withdrawal management working? Like, what was our intent? How do we do it differently? And that was some of the things Sarah was talking about. And really that's where we get our, you know, all of those lessons learned that we presented today were really through those conversations of like, oh yeah, like we and it's not that they don't love the space that they have. They're very proud of it, and we're very proud of it. It's just that we can be critical and say, okay, well, how can we do it better on the next one? How does it function better for you? And so that's our goal. And so that's through meetings. We've had a lot of programming meetings with the staff. They have their own consultant who also has been helping them as from a business side about some of their programs and some of their you know, their just how they work. And so they're sort of documenting a lot of that. And then with that comes some of the things about the building and you know, how they want to function differently. Do they want, you know, more people here, more people, you know, in certain areas doing different tasks. So really just combining all of that. And it's been a plethora of information. Really great facilities team there has been wonderful to provide us their very candid thoughts on some of the systems and, you know, a lot of the things that were manufactured during COVID and how they're working and how they can be improved. But yeah, it's been helpful. Don't get to do that a lot, so it's really nice. It's hard sometimes, but it's really nice.
Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you coming in and presenting. And I would like to remind everyone that if you want to enter this year's Oregon Architecture Award, submission period is open until Friday. So get your things in. Looks like we're just getting thanks. Thank you again so much, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thanks
Thanks,
for having
Kathy.
us.
Thanks, everybody, for
Thanks,
having
everyone.
us.
Yeah, thank
Everyone.
you.
Yep, lots and lots of thanks. All right, goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.